Page 57. This is a lesson on a 12-bar blues improvisation. Have we had 12-bar blues yet? I don't remember. I've gone through so many of these method books now, I can't remember who's done what. I'm going to pretend that we haven't really talked about them, so I'm going to cover them. So if we've already talked about them, I apologize for boring you a while. And if we haven't talked about them, well, I'll apologize for boring you anyway, because I don't know. Some people enjoy it, some people don't. I don't know. Blues is a style of music. Swing, jazz, blues, rock and roll, honky-tonk, classical, different styles of music, different genre or form, whatever. When we talk 12-bar blues, a bar is a measure. So they're talking about 12 measures. And blues doesn't have to, but many times you'll find that the blues follows a set chord progression. And that chord progression lasts for 12 measures. And that's what they're talking here. And they show it at the top of the page. Here we're in the key of D major. Okay. We're not really using a D major scale. We're going to use a D blues scale. I don't really teach the blues scales because the patterns, whole steps and half step is different than a major or minor scale. I don't have videos on blues scales. As I said, I don't teach them, but you can figure out what the pattern is and use that if you want. But we're talking D. We're going to start on D. And we got 4 measures of D chords. See, the chords are going to work the same as major or minor, whatever. So here it's a D. We got 4 measures of that. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. And then you get 2 measures of the 4 chord, which would be the G chord, because it's a 1 chord. And it doesn't matter where you play it. 2 measures of that, and then back to 2 measures of D chord again. And then you ended up with 1 measure of the 5 chord or 5/7 chord. Here they're just using the 5 chord. 1 measure of that, and then 1 measure 4 chord, and then 2 measures of 1 chord again. And that's 12 measures total, and that would be the pattern. So if you want to write blues or whatever, follow that chord progression, you'll be fine. Now, in reality, blues will use almost all 7th chords. So it won't be a 1 chord, it'll be a 1/7 chord. And the 4 chord will be a G chord, it'll be a G7 chord. They just use the 7th chord throughout. Don't have to, but you'll find a lot of blues pieces will use 7th chords. We're keeping it simple, we're leaving off the 7th chord. I would just as soon add it with the 5, because it's a 5/7. You get in the habit of doing it. But you don't have to. Instead of this, you do that. Because a 5 chord is this. I just put the C sharp on the bottom. That's all it is. Whichever. And the book is doing that one. I prefer this one. Now, if you want it to be longer than 12 measures, you just keep repeating this. And if you're going to repeat it, then that last measure, that 1 chord at the end, instead of 2 measures of 1 chord, the last chord would go back to the 5/7 chord. Because that leads into the 1 chord, which is at the beginning. So if you're going to repeat it, you would change that last measure from a 1 chord to a 5 chord or 5/7 chord, and then repeat. Then the last time you do it, you play a 1 chord. So you can make it last as long as you want. Now let's talk about this piece down at the bottom of the page. They didn't give it a title. Okay, don't maybe you give it a title. I don't care. But this is going to follow the 12-bar blues. You'll notice there are 12 measures, 4 measures in each line. So I'm just going to go through the pattern I normally do for learning a piece of music, improvising. Now they give an example of a blues scale, and that's what the middle of the page is here. You can do a 3 on that F. Whatever. But it's the pattern of each note. So you have a minor 3rd, and then a major 2nd, and then a minor 2nd, minor 2nd, minor 3rd, major 2nd. And that's the pattern of a blues scale. You can start and end on any note, use that pattern, and you got a blues scale for that. Let's look at this piece at the bottom and see what we can do with it. I'll look it over. It's going to be 12 bars, so it's going to be 12 measures. 3 lines, 4 measures each. Treble bass clef, 2 sharps in the key signature. You're in D not D major, you're in a D blues scale. But for the purpose of the chords, we're going to use the D major chords. 4/4 time signature. Let's see what this melody's going on here. We're just, basically, this is a scale. It's the rhythm you got to watch out for. Again, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and then go down. I just went up the scale, whatever. Second line, we're doing it again, but we're starting in the 4th step. And now we're going to use the blues scale starting on a G. Remember I said a minor third, a major second, minor second, well, that's the pattern we're using here, is now, in the next 2 measures, they don't give you get to do it. You think, okay, well, I'll just go back down. No, because in measures 5 and 6, we're on the 4 chord. In the next 2 measures, we're back on the 1 chord. So I'm not going to use the 4 chord stuff for the 1 chord. No, got to change that. I'll come back to that. The measure 9, the last measure, now we got triplets. And this is, I'll talk about triplets more in a minute, but right now it's just, and again, it's just a scale. But you'll notice here, measure 9 is the 5 chord, so we're starting on the 5th step of the scale. We're using that one. We're using an A blues scale. But in the next one, it's a 4 chord, so we're going to come down and use the G blues scale. Yeah? And then the last 2 measures, they let you figure it out. Isn't that nice? So we have the patterns. Let's look at the left hand. We have the 1 chord. And even though in the second measure you're doing this, and by the way, I use a 5/2 on that one. This pattern of it's very common in blues and boogie woogie and so forth. And when I get it, I always do a 5/2 on the lower one because the thumb doesn't have to do them all. It helps to keep it straight in my mind where I'm at. So I use a 5/2. But it's still a 1 chord. These others, they're like passing notes or just extra little notes stuck in, but it doesn't change the harmony. They're just here. And we're going to stick with the same type of chord for the rest of the line then. But then on measure 5, we have the 4 chord, so we're up here. Because and the same pattern. But then in the next 2 measures, it's got to go back to the 1 chord. You got to come down here. And then in measure 9, it's the 5 chord up here. Different rhythm, 4 chord, and then the 1 chord. So we get the chords figured out. It's the chord sequence for a 12-bar blues pattern. And if I were going to repeat this and go back and do it some more, then in that last measure, rather than a 1 chord, I'd go back to the 5 chord here. So it'd be a 1 chord, and then I'd go back to the 5 chord, and that way when I repeat, it leads into the 1 chord. Now, if I don't repeat it, only do that. Now, what about these measures that are empty? Well, in the first line, it's the left hand, and you can simply follow the same pattern in those that you did in the first 2 measures. So it's here, and then here, and then you got to go from here. Well, going from measure 4 to 5, I'm going from here to here. I'm just sort of a pivot I'm coming across. And then measure 7, back to the 1 chord. Just reach down. And then measure 9 is a 5 chord, 4, and then a 1 chord. As far as the rhythm and so forth, it's really kind of up to you. I was just using the same pattern that was already established. So that would be the left-hand chords. As far as the right hand, let's see what's going on there in the second line. We have in measure 5 and 6, we're in the 4 chord area here, so we're G. But I don't want to use the same thing going down because now I got to go to the 1 chord down here. So where's the 1 chord at? We'll look at the line above. That's 1 chord. So I just play those measures in the second line. So the second line would be that, the whole line. Then just reach out. You have one beat rest, come down and down. That's how I would do it. And then measure 9. Your 5 chord is triplets. Then 4 chord down here, still triplets. And now the 1 chord. Well, what do we do? We're back in these notes, the notes like you were using in the first line. We're going to use those notes. What are we doing with those? It's up to you. I could do the same triplet pattern here. And then in the last measure, anything you want, just make sure it's a 1 chord. I could play the pattern coming down. Or I could just make up something else, as long as it sticks with the 1 chord harmony. Oh, well, the 1 chord notes in a D blues scale. You want to stick with those notes. Okay. And it's up to you what you do. And then you attempt to put them together. Well, good luck with that. Then you come up here. Back to the 1 chord. You got to come down here now, like in the first line. And the last line, triplets up here. 4, and the 1 chord. What do you want to do there? You don't have to do triplets here. You can do most anything you want. You want to finish it off similar to the last 2 measures of the first line, you can play that. Or do it with triplets and the same rhythm as measures 9 and 10 here. Now that's something. Experiment. Different people would do it differently. You don't have to absolutely do it a certain way. In the second line, you don't have to use the pattern like they did in the first line. If you want to change that to something else, as far as I'm concerned, go for it. But you need to be using those notes in that D blues scale. Now let's talk about these triplets and how does this work together. You'll notice up above where the tempo is supposed to be there, it says relaxed. It tells you the mood. And then it gives that 2/8 notes in that triplet thing. That is the notation to tell you to swing the rhythm. They could have put in a note to swing the rhythm, or they could have just left it out and you'd do it anyway. Because in swing, blues, and jazz, the normal rhythm, the normal style is to swing the 8th notes. You just do it. You don't need a note to tell you to do it. If they want straight 8th notes, they should put a note in the music straight or even, something to that effect. So even with that note, if that note and the rhythm up above the first staff were not there, those 2/8 notes equal blah, blah, if that were not there, I'd still swing the rhythm. And you do that, it's a felt thing. It's not a triplet, but it could be. It's very close. That's why triplets work. It's felt. It's not 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. It's 1 and 2 and 3. You feel this. It's not quite a triplet. It's not quite a dotted rhythm. It's sort of in between. And depending on the music, some of those short notes might be longer than others. But what if I do that? One and 2 and 3. Then on the last line, the triplets kind of fill right into it. They just kind of fill into this bum, ba, bum, ba, bum, ba, bum, ba, even though it's not exactly the same. So it's kind of a style. Now, there is a problem in blues. It's not really a problem, but it's a catch, a gotcha, a limit, a something. I don't know what it is. But there's a limit to how fast or how slow you can go and swing the rhythm. Because if you go too slow, bum, 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 it doesn't swing. That's why a lot of times in blues pieces, when it slows down at the end, they'll change it to a straight rhythm. They'll just start doing straight because it doesn't swing anymore. Or if you go too fast, you can't swing it. Bum, 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 bum. I had a band conductor, a very knowledgeable, experienced band conductor of the concert band I was in, and we had a situation. It was a medley, and part of one of the pieces was a swing. A swing. And he wanted that boom, 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 but it was so fast it was silly. I mean, it was all I could do not to laugh because it was just too fast to swing it. However, that's what we did because that's what he wanted because he's a conductor and he had the stick, so you do what they want. So a little bit about this. As far as a play with me, I don't do something on this because it's up to you on what you want to do. So let me know if you have any questions, or better still, ask your teacher.